Hey guys, and in this video we're going to be discussing the Guard class. There's a lot of archetypes within this class, and most of them are obviously going to fall within the primary role of what a guard is supposed to do, which is primary melee damage, but obviously the archetypes add a bit of uniqueness to each class. As I mentioned before, there's quite a few archetypes underneath this class, so we're just going to jump sort of right in. And we're going to start with the AoE guard class. You're actually seeing Blaze, who falls within this archetype on your screen. So they're characterized by their talent, which right now reads attacks all blocked enemies. This is actually a bit of a mistranslation. I guess it would actually be a bit more accurate to say that they attack as many enemies within range as equal to their block count. I know that's a bit of a long sentence, but it is a bit more accurate because they don't actually have to be actively blocking the enemy in order to attack them. And in fact, in some cases, that's not what you want. You actually have some guards within this archetype that can increase their range. For example, Blaze herself has a second skill which will give her a permanent attack range increase of another square in front of her. And if this trait were actually accurate, then that extended range would actually be kind of useless. But thankfully this is just like a mistranslation, and it is not. It's like the extended range is actually very, very useful. So this a few things about this archetype. One, their DP cost can actually be quite expensive just because they do get hit with a +2 on each promotion to elite. But they do gain an additional block count upon promotion. So you can see that Blaze here blocks 2 enemies, but upon promotion she's going to get an increase of block to +1. That can be really powerful in certain scenarios, just because, you know, if 3 enemies do happen to then reach in her range, you know, that's just a flat out 50% damage increase compared to her E1 case. So that +1 block is actually quite powerful within certain circumstances. So obviously the primary purpose of like your AoE guards is to just mow down hordes of enemies, and their stat line as a result is generally offensive. I mean, the guard class in general is pretty offensive, but their stat line is pretty much geared towards you know, mowing down enemies. So all AoE guards will have some kind of attack buff increase. This power strike is quite common within the guard class in general. But in addition, they also tend to have like some attack modifier plus like additional bonuses on their second skill. So you can see here Blaze is getting plus defense and plus attack range. Most guards within this archetype for their second skills will usually still include attack modifiers, but usually just grant some like bonuses. Like Spectre's, for example, prevents her from dying. And Baraka's, I know, also like increases his range, but like makes him do like insane amounts of damage and adds a slow. One thing that is common also within this archetype is some form of survivability, just because when you do upgrade them and they get 3 block, it can be a little bit difficult for them to like sustain actually blocking 3 enemies. So usually these units have a bit of like survivability. So in the case of Blaze, it's coming in the form of her talents, so like this emergency defibrillation, and the harsh training is CC reduction, which is actually quite nice as well. Spectre has it on her skill. Her S2 makes her so that she can't die. Baraka has a bit of a weak one on his talent. It's just sort of like a percent attack and defense debuff when he's blocking, I think, 2 or more enemies. But nonetheless, you're going to find some form of like defensive bonus just to sort of help them stay alive. So while I wouldn't say that this archetype in particular is absolutely necessary, you do benefit from quite a few of them. There are some of them that are quite good, namely, obviously, if you do get Blaze, take her all the way because she is a very good unit. And Spectre also sees some like some good use, particularly with her invulnerability or her inability to die while her S2 is active. I definitely used her in my main account in the last contingency contract to some pretty good effect. One notable member of this archetype is also the 3-star version. Where is she? I believe it's Popcard. Yeah. one thing to note about her is because she can't be promoted to Elite 2, she obviously loses out on the bonus block. And that can be sort of like hit or miss. In her case, it could actually be a bit of a boon just because not blocking 3 enemies, considering she can't go to Elite 2, also means she doesn't really get as many defensive stats and whatnot. So less block for her can actually be kind of useful for survivability, because usually you don't get enough defensive stats to warrant the additional block. But nonetheless, I just sort of wanted to point that out. Like if you do happen to end up using her, she's an okay unit, but you know, you might want to pass on her because she doesn't get that extra DPS from being promoted. So the next one that we're going to talk about is the Duelist class, and in my case, I am leveling up Melantha here, who all falls within this class. So this archetype is defined primarily by kind of being stat sticks. So you can kind of see here that Melantha here has 2600 HP and 763 attack, and she's doing this at Elite 1 level 55, compared to Blaze, who is at 80 and has 2100 and 641 attack. You can clearly see that like Melantha's stats are actually like really high, like considering she is a 3-star unit being compared to a 6-star unit who has what 25 more levels, and she's still beating out on HP and attack. So yeah, this class is very much known for having really high HP, really high attack. It comes at the cost of low defense, and the other thing that they have against them is they can only block 1 unit. So this 1 block seems a bit bad, but it's actually a bit of a pro too. Members of this archetype are really designed to tank multiple enemies. You can see here her defense is 155. That is pitifully low. And if she were to take groups of like melee enemies, like, or physical damage dealing enemies, even if she's got like two on them, even though she's got like really high attack, she's still going to like fall down pretty easily just because of that like low defense. So she actually kind of relies on her 1 block in order to sort of sustain and keep herself alive. So in this case, the 1 block's definitely not bad. The primary purpose of this archetype, as is noted by the Duelist tag, is that they're meant to just sort of like 1v1 or, you know, hold off an important enemy. You can usually think of them as sort of like boss killers to some extent. Oftentimes you might place them around, drop them in front of like a key target, have them like either 1v1 or hold them off. You might like still have a healer or like some like snipers behind this. The point is they're the primary unit that's going to hold off the boss, and their stats are pretty much geared to that. Skill-wise, it's pretty much damage, and in some cases you might get like some survivability in the form of either HP gain or HP healing. Stuff like that is fairly common. I know like Scotty, which is the 6-star counterpart, on her 3rd skill has like a massive HP gain. She goes to like 6k attack. HP once she's got her 3rd skill active. Melantha here obviously has the attack skill on her 1st and only skill because she's a 3-star. Attack damage buffs are obviously, percent buffs are obviously also going to be very popular. Point of this class here is to trade and to like win trades for you. So Melantha is sort of a notable unit. Despite being a 3-star unit, I actually recommend that you max her out unless you get something like Scotty and who would be like a direct upgrade. They're fairly good on DP cost, and I would recommend that you have at least one of them. So I would say that like this archetype, it's not like strictly necessary, but I do think that having one member of this archetype can be very beneficial. It can buy you a lot of breathing room. And that's pretty much my thoughts. Definitely worth Melantha, definitely worth it. People use her like really late into the game, but obviously if you get something like Scotty, who is the 6-star counterpart, by all means replace her with Scotty. The next one we're going to talk about is the Arts Guard, which I'm not sure if I have one. Actually, a 4-star Moose I might have. Yeah. So this archetype is known for its trait, obviously, which deals arts damage. So basically, they just deal arts damage with each of their attacks, as opposed to having it tied to skills, which certain other operators will have. So you can kind of think of this as a bit of a derivative of your duelist class, but there are some like really big differences. Notably, they have much worse overall HP and attack, but the attack stat you can kind of like ignore as much because they're dealing arts damage. So the lower attack sort of lets them bypass. So the fact that they're dealing arts damage lets them bypass defense anyway. So they can still duel like high defense enemies quite well. They also do tend to have more survivability. I know she looks like really weak right now, but she's also not leveled, and she has 173 compared to like Melantha's 155. So she already has higher defense, and like there isn't a single point invested into her, and Melantha's like capped. So yeah, they do tend to have more defense and better overall. Like they do have lower HP as well. So the like maybe potentially around the same amount of survivability once you factor in like the differences between the reduced HP but the higher defense. But the main thing here is the arts damage. They still can only block one enemy, so they're still going to primarily go 1v1. And they'll usually win out against like high defense enemies just because they will be able to sort of survive a bit more, whereas like these guys will be dealing full damage to the enemies. So in terms of skill, you're just going to find more modest like stat buffs. You're generally not going to find like as big numbers on these these classes, just because they don't want their attack stat to be too high, because otherwise it would be pretty broken if they're dealing arts damage and ignoring defensive enemies, but still hitting as hard as, say, for example, Melantha or Scotty. But like that's just sort of what you're going to get. I mean, they're still pretty solid guards. You do have much less, I think, options here, because you only really have Moose here and her 5-star version. Her 5-star version, her second skill actually does let her block, I believe, 2 enemies, and that can also be very useful. I believe if you do like get her, the 5-star variant in particular, I do think she is like worth some investment, because she can be her second skill can actually be like pretty decent and quite worthwhile. Aside from that, I wouldn't really consider this archetype like super necessary, just because you do have like other ways of dealing arts damage, primarily within the like caster class, but you also have some within the other variants of the guard class as well. Some of them do have access to arts damage, like Braca from the AoE archetype and Lapland from the range archetype, which we'll talk about later. Next, we're going to talk about the self-sustain sort of archetype. This archetype is like exclusive to Helger. He's like the only operator that is within this archetype. And you can also kind of think of him as sort of like another derivative of the Duelist class. The main thing that separates them apart still has tremendously high HP, as you can see here. He is also Elite 1 level 50, so I believe he's like down 5 levels, from Melantha, and has quite a bit more HP. He's got about 400 more HP, and obviously there's like the star differences between them. They have less attack, as you can also see, like Melantha does have more attack. But the main thing is like they can't be healed by other units, but they can self-sustain by just attacking other units, and they can also gain like this trait here actually like increases with level, so that promotion, so that'll go to that'll go to 70 after being promoted to Elite 2. All in all, despite this trait, I've said this multiple times, of not being able to be healed, certain things like Lavender's global healing passive in the form of her talent do like circumvent that, but aside from that, they're just meant to duel and out-sustain enemies. They do get more expensive at E2, so they're quite expensive compared to your standard 1v1. like Duelist guards, but you know, once you like get Helger to Elite 2, he pretty much, and like you invest in his particularly his second skill, there are very few things that he can actually 1v1, particularly in terms of like physical damage, because of this insane dodge chance. There aren't really any other operators within this archetype, so we can't really like make more generalizations about that. But overall, I mean, you can kind of think of them as duelists with higher HP, and you know, a bit more like self-sustain at the cost of not being able to be healed. Next, we're going to talk about the Brawler archetype, which unfortunately, I'm not sure if I have yeah, I do. I have Bee Hunter here. So there's also very few units within this archetype. You have Bee Hunter and then 5-star Indra, I believe, who can only be gotten from the recruitment tags, which kind of sucks and makes her really hard to get. So unlike other guards within this archetype, these actually have really low DP. So you can see Bee Hunter here only has a cost of 6. And for a 4-star unit, that's actually like really good. That actually makes her cheaper than like Vanguards of similar rarity. So if I were to come here to career, even though he's been promoted, like if we remove his promotion from Elite 1, you're still looking at 8, and I guess 6 when he's got his full potential, which, you know, compares pretty even with Bee Hunter, who here also has 6 and still is lacking her final DP cost, and so she would be 5. So this archetype is actually very, very cheap. The compensation for being so cheap is obviously going to be in the form of reduced stats, particularly like their attack stat is not very impressive. However, they still actually get to do pretty good offense thanks to this very fast attack speed. So being able to just hit out a bunch of times, like weak hits, but like hitting very quickly, the DPS will start to stack up. A few things that both Bee Hunter and her 5-star counterpart share in common is some form of dodging. So Bee Hunter gets it in the form of her skill. Her first skill is a passive chance to dodge physical attacks. That will go up as you invest into skills. And with Indra, I believe this comes in the form of her talent. She'll have some dodge chance within her talent. So you do get some bonus survivability in the form of dodge, which is very nice to have. And so while brawlers, I would say, aren't like something that I would say you absolutely will need, they are kind of fun to play around with. And if you do happen to get 5-star Indra, she does have some actual like good dueling potential, just because she has a skill that helps her with sustain, and she has some armor penetration aspects to one of her skills as well, which is actually like quite good and helps her keep that DPS, which is nice. So the next archetype that we're going to talk about is the Range Guard archetype, and this is probably one of the best archetypes within this class. So this is the archetype that Silver Ash belongs to, who, if you watched my first video on this channel, you noticed I told you guys that he's pretty much the best unit that you can get from the new player banner. And so this archetype is categorized by their trait / range. So their trait lets them deal range attacks that deal 80% of their normal attack. And their range, which this is a fully maxed out range, which they get at Elite 2. At start, they're missing this very last box down here, so it's a little bit shorter. So there are like some really good operators, particularly the 2 top operators within the 6 and 5-star category are Silver Ash and Lapland, both of whom are really, really good operators. If you get either of them, hell, if you get both of them, I actually consider leveling them both up. They're both phenomenal operators, very worth it. So despite like having like this range bonus, like there's really not much, like they didn't really get penalized for having like this bonus. They have more cost than Duelist guards, obviously, but they have fairly reasonable cost. They don't get punished with like +2 going to Elite 2. stats didn't really get punished either. Like they have a pretty solid spread of good HP, solid defense, solid attack. Yeah, all in all, like this is a really good archetype with like a really good stat spread, and really good like a decent cost for their for like what you're getting. And so aside from having like a good stat spread, they also have been blessed so far, like particularly like I said, Lapland and Silver Ash here with some like pretty good skills. So Silver Ash in particular, so his second skill lets him become a bit of a sub tank, which is decent. His third skill in particular, True Silver Slash, is phenomenal. Just being able to, like, his attack becomes insane, and being able to deal attacks to multiple enemies. This count actually does go up as you invest more into the skill. And Lapland on her second skill has the ability to turn her damage into arts damage as well as hit 2 targets at the same time. Her first skill is kind of like Blaze's second skill in the sense that it needs to be charged up, but then you gain permanent attack and I believe damage resist chance. So like all in all, some really good skills within this within the top 2 units of this archetype. And aside from that, they've also got really good talents, the top 2 units within this archetype. Lapland's being able to silence is really good, particularly at E2. She can perma-silence an enemy. So that lets things like the slugs that you encounter starting in episode 4, various slugs that I think, let's see, does this one have slugs? Nope. 4-7, do you? One of these has a bunch of slugs. Yeah. So that lets things like these slugs, it prevents them from like detonating, which can be very, very useful in terms of protecting your operators. And you'll see ice versions of those in episode 6. So Lapland Silence does have plenty of applicability in multiple missions. And yeah, definitely worth leveling. So again, while I wouldn't say that this archetype is like absolutely necessary, you do have 2 really good units in this archetype, and if you do get them, definitely worth picking them up and leveling them. One final thing that I forgot to mention was that usually through their skills, operators have some way of getting rid of this penalty of this 80% damage. So like True Silver Slash, for example, regards his attacks, despite having like a massive attack range, it'll regard all his attacks as melee attacks, thereby ignoring the 80% damage. He'll deal 100%, and Lapland's second skill will also ignore the 80% demerit on her range attacks. So despite having that demerit, like they have ways of getting around it. So all in all, really good. Next, we have our Dual Strike guards, and these guards are, I actually don't have any of them, just because I think in NA right now, the only option you have is 6-star Chen. There are a few others over in China, but like we still haven't ended up getting those. So this archetype is defined by being able to just sort of deal damage twice. And so basically every time they attack, they'll deal 2 instances of damage. To compensate for this, they're going to have less attack power. So a unit like Chen actually like fully maxed out, doesn't have like super high attack stat. I believe she's actually at around like 600 and something, and that's at like E2 level 90. And the other thing that they have is that despite attacking twice, they will only have they'll only gain 1 SP, and that's actually like important because members of this class tend to be also what's considered nukers. So basically, what nukers do is their skills just provide some large burst, as opposed to some consistent damage or some persistent effect. So like if you look at Liskarm here, like her skills have like this plus 80% for 8 seconds, or this skill which will last like 20 seconds. Like members of this archetype are just sort of like just some like hard-hitting skill, and then that's it. Like it won't persist. So like kind of for example, like this first skill, I actually don't know if I have like any real nukers, but like kind of like for this first skill, you just like do one instance of damage and that's it. But their skills will have like reasonably higher SP costs. Like Chen's S2 is at 20 when it's fully mastered. So nukers, being able to just like drop them and then deal like some large amount of damage is kind of nice, but they also tend to have the issue of like their skills all being on attack, offensive recovery, so they'll only gain SP every time they're attacking, and that kind of sucks, because it means that like if there's a break in enemy spawns, they're not going to be passively charging up their skills, kind of like Blaze's second skill here. They do generally sometimes have some way of compensating for this. So for example, like Chen has in her talent a passive SP gain for units that have either on attack or defensive recovery SP cost. And one of the other units within this class also has another way of gaining bonus SP. Their lower attack stats can be an issue. In the case of Chen, it's generally not as much of an issue just because her nuke skill, particularly her second skill, has a really high attack modifier, which sort of helps her deal like quite a bit of damage when she's using her second skill. It can be an issue with some of the other operators in the class just because some of them don't have as like powerful nukes, which can kind of suck. Right now, you only have one option, which is Chen, and if you do happen to get her, by all means level her. She is pretty much a pretty solid unit. But if you don't have her, like that's fine. Like you're not really missing out on something like super, like devastating gameplay wise. Definitely prioritize units like Blaze or Silver Ash from the guard class from a gameplay perspective anyway, before someone like Chen. And that brings us to the last archetype, within this class, and that is the Supporter. And here we have the 3-star variant, which is Doberman. And so, as the name sort of suggests, their job is to aid in other units. In my opinion, they're a bit of a lackluster class. So they're mainly defined by, usually it's in the form of talents that benefit other units. So there's two units here. There's Doberman, which is the 4-star counterpart, and the 5-star counterpart is Swire, who I believe you can get her skin still. Yeah, you have a few more days to get Swire's skin. So the class is designed to primarily buff other units. So in the form of their talents. So Doberman's just gives an attack set to all 3-star units. Swire's does it to all melee units in the form of her talent as well. Aside from that, they do have this bonus range. This is their max range. This just sort of aids in, you protecting them. It lets you like place them behind another unit so that they can deal some auxiliary damage. Unfortunately, in terms of stats, they're nothing super special. Their attack stat's pretty low in order to compensate for the fact that they're getting their talents. Doberman has this same power strike, but like a percentage-based attack on a low attack unit is obviously not going to result in particularly a lot of DPS. The other thing too is generally their supportive skills are a bit like lackluster, so this small attack boost to all 3-star operators is like whatever. It kind of, when you do like max her out, I believe it goes to like 11%, and that's at Elite 2 and full potential, or up to her potential increasing, potential 5, I guess this would be. Like plus 11 attack to your 3-star operators is, I mean, it's okay, I guess, but you won't probably really be fielding many 3-star operators. I guess for Melanthe, that'd be great because she has really high attack, but for most of your other units, it's going to be like whatever. And obviously, it's a talent that loses in value with the less 3-star operators in your unit, in your squad. Swire's is a bit better in that it's not like Stargated, it's all melee enemies, but it's more restrictive. So it's basically just the 9 tiles, or actually 8, I believe, around her. So like kind of here in a grid, she has to kind of be in the center of those units, and that can be problematic just because there are some maps where that's going to be difficult. Of course, that's also true vice versa. Like there are some maps like the supply stage, I believe it's the cache one. Yeah, like for example, on this map it'd be super easy, right? Because you could just drop Swire right here, and then all of these units would just like gain a nice attack bonus. But of course, it has to be melee enemies as melee units also, and obviously, like for every one that is good, every map that is good, you're also going to encounter like bad maps, right? Like here, you can plop her down here, and she can boost 3 allies because the ranged ones won't get anything, or I guess if you could put her here and get more, but yeah, it's going to really depend on the map in terms of how you can use those bonuses. And then on top of that, when all is said and done, like the bonuses aren't particularly that amazing. So for those reasons, I kind of think this archetype in particular is a bit lackluster. I wouldn't really level any of the supporters even if you get them. So sorry, I wouldn't level any of the support guard archetypes even if you get them. So I'd pass on Doberman, and I'd pass on Swire also. Yeah, in my opinion, you could just do better with other supporters, right? Like if you want attack buffs, like Sora here can give you, you know, just flat out 8 large attack buffs, 80% of her attack. And she does it to all allies in range as opposed to just like melees or to just 3-star operators or whatever. There are other classes that can give more dedicated buffs and solve that role a bit better. So that pretty much concludes the guard class. Apologies, this video I know is going to be super long just because there were so many archetypes within the guard class. It is a super popular class, and yeah, I needed to cover all of them. But that is going to be it for this video. I hope to see everyone in the next one, which should be the caster class, which thankfully does not have as many archetypes, so expect that to be a much shorter video. And peace out, everyone.